For some reason, we are always drawn to the things that should repel us the most. Horror seems to awaken a macabre interest in all the things we would usually leave well alone, letting us peer into the darkest side of human nature and revel in its most unpleasant realities. And video games do that to the most literal degree. As technology improves and we hurtle ever forward through time, the gaming industry has taken horror to even greater heights than ever before, finding the most viscerally terrifying visuals and scenarios that have stayed with us long after playing. The 2010s alone have seen some of the most inventive titles come along to permanently scar our minds. But there's only a handful that can be deigned as the scariest of the lot when we really dig into 10 years of horror. Deformed, fleshy mutants, mass murderers, and possessed teddy bears await in a celebration of all things scream-inducing from the past decade. But what particular flavour of mind-rending terror is the one that is really gonna last the ages? I am the Necromorph, Ash from WhatCulture Gaming, and these are the 10 scariest video games of the decade. Honourable mention, PT 2014. If it were up to the powers that be, PT wouldn't even be on this list. I mean, realistically, it's a playable teaser for a game that never came out. What should rightly be sitting here in its place is, of course, Konami's Silent Hills. Alas, the spine-tingling vision of Lisa is all we have to know that title by, and here is where we pay our dues. Despite being a demo, PT has made it onto countless scariest game ever lists since it dropped on the PlayStation Store in 2014, dangling the prospect of a new Silent Hill title with Guillermo del Toro and Hideo Kojima at the helm in what is one of the most psychologically exhausting experiences you can put yourself through on a console. For what amounts to one corridor repeating on itself into infinity, PT's immersive atmosphere, unsettling visuals, and innovative use of literally just one ghost with a bit of sick downer are overwhelmingly terrifying. It's video game black magic used for utmost evil purposes, and just makes us all pine for what could have been. Especially since the damn thing isn't even playable anymore. 10. Five Nights at Freddy's 4, 2015. The Five Nights at Freddy's series has long been a cult hit for fans of all things furry. Combining cutesy restaurant mascots with a compulsion to stuff humans into a claustrophobic, mechanical death inside an animatronic suit, the fine line between children's entertainment and outright horror was smashed the moment Scott Cawthon decided to bring Freddy Fazbear's Pizza to life. And whilst every title has its own nightmarish scenario to work through, it is the fourth installment of the series that is lauded as being the scariest of the lot. Pumped full of jump scares from the Fazbear mascots decked out with some pretty gnarly teeth and claws, the game follows the usual formula of attempting to survive the night by keeping a watchful eye out in the dark. This time, however, instead of a security room at Fazbear's, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 plays out in a child's bedroom as an intricate story unravels between the night's events. And to make matters worse, nightmare versions of the classic mascots plague a troubled young boy in place of the usual grown security officer. It leveled up the formula to its natural peak, which our Screech is all but confirmed. 9. SOMA, 2015. The undisputed king of atmosphere that perfectly blends science fiction and horror, SOMA is an underwater hellscape that burrows into a player's psyche and doesn't let up until you solve the mysteries hidden in its abandoned research facility. Whilst it isn't out-and-out repellent imagery and gory fight scenes in the same way some of the other titles on this list are, SOMA's psychological onslaught is more than enough to earn its place as one of the scariest video games out there. Proving it is not body count that matters, it is what you do with it. Or something like that, considering the whole biomechanical mess of the people you encounter there anyway. SOMA's strengths lie in a chilling narrative you have to uncover by roaming the halls of an isolated building on the bottom of the ocean, making for a particularly intense time as you attempt to avoid errant robots and crack puzzles for clues. Existential dread distilled into its most potent form, it is one of those titles that will stay with you long after playing, and one of the finer examples of survival horror out there. 8. Layers of Fear, 2016. Much in the same way as PT, Layers of Fear utilises an ever-morphing house to tell its story as you charge room to room in search of answers. These answers initially seem like the struggles of an artist in search of how to complete his masterpiece, but it soon becomes apparent that all is not as it seems with our worrisome central character. Hallucinations run rampant that give way to a sinister past, with the truth of his magnum opus far more grisly than you'd expect from the surface alone. Layer by layer, horror is revealed, sending the player into a spiral of rancid visuals and stressful transformations that make for a brain-scrambling experience. For a little indie game with nothing other than artistic swirling to send you round the bend, Layers of Fear executes its premise with skin-crawling efficiency, and has long stood as one of the scariest and most unique games of its medium. Who knew that paint could be this scary? 7. Until Dawn, 2015. The most successful title to blend cinematic storytelling with innovative gameplay, Until Dawn offers an experience that feels like stepping inside a movie as much as it does powering through a AAA title. Crafting a narrative that works with the player to hone in on their deepest fears, Until Dawn has an excellent system that quizzes you through therapy cutscenes, where selecting images that make you uncomfortable are then incorporated into the gameplay to make it as disturbingly personalised as possible. It is hand-tailored horror at its finest. Sticking this into a storyline that weaves between a slasher and a supernatural threat is another genius move. And you are never quite sure what is going on or why unless you desperately seek out answers, which of course are not easy to get a hold of. Replete with perfectly timed jump scares and engrossing mystery and wonderful, original characters that you're invested in keeping alive, Until Dawn is terrifying in more ways than one, and is as much a solid game as it was a bold new step for the industry. 6. Amnesia: The Dark Descent, 2010. Whilst Amnesia might have lost some of its bite in the years after release, The Dark Descent is undoubtedly one of the most influential games of its kind, delivering a world of chest-tightening fear as Daniel attempts to escape an evil force hunting him down. Players have to avoid a shadowy nightmare intent on his destruction, wearing down his sanity with each appearance of its gatherers' torn, ragged faces and pasty bodies. And to make matters all the worse, Daniel has no idea what the hell is going on thanks to a nasty case of the titular amnesia. Waking up in a castle inhabited by hostile monsters and no idea why is a recipe for disaster. There's no weapon for the player to fight back with, forced only to run and hide instead. The constant worry of breaking Daniel's mind with the horrors he's up against makes for a race against time to get to the truth. But there's a reason it was forgotten in the first place. 5. Dead Space 2, 2011. With the original 2008 Dead Space cut off by Old Father Time for this list's decade span, the sequel is gonna have to step up and take its rightful place as one of the scariest entries into horror video game canon. Bringing us another dose of limb-severing unpleasantness, Isaac goes ham on a bunch of necromorphs terrorizing a civilian space station, unleashing a whole new range of weapons against a whole new range of monsters in the process. Whilst this is obviously cool as all hell, the horrifying design work of the necromorphs makes any action-packed sequences soon lose their shine. Dead Space 2 takes every spine-chilling moment from the first game and cranks it up to 11, using light and darkness to trick players into a false sense of security to make its motherload of jump scares all the more effective. The whole game is an exercise in anxiety, basically, and as entertaining as it is absolutely nerve-shredding. Dead Space 2 has not only earned its place amongst the scariest video games of the decade, but also as one of the most expensive titles ever, putting its budget to good use for some absolutely pant-wetting sequences. 4. The Evil Within 2, 2017. Another sequel that takes the original recipe and stirs in its own special spice mix, The Evil Within 2 improves upon its formula endlessly as the game unfolds, making for a genuinely unnerving experience as your senses are battered by the most repugnant visuals Tango Gameworks can throw at you. Silent Hill for the generation that missed out on its waking nightmare, The Evil Within 2 prides itself on a concept that sees you enter a town transformed into a psychological hellhole, populated by residents best left alone. What makes The Evil Within 2 a better game than its predecessor, as well as one of the scariest offerings on the market, is a feature that isn't often gifted to survival horror games in a particularly well-executed manner: an open world. There's a genuine fear that stumbling through a side quest or abandoned house can open up a whole new avenue of spooky content, toying with expectations in perhaps one of the most impressive examples of anything can happen horror video games have to offer. 3. Outlast, 2013. The Outlast franchise has earned its place as enough to give even the hardiest of players the willies, or rather quite the opposite if we're talking all the genital mutilation that goes on, taking classic found footage tropes and transposing them across a video game universe that does not let up no matter how much you might want it to. And the original Outlast is a feat of endurance born from this concept, pitting one man and his night vision camera against an asylum full of monstrous inmates that are mostly intent on stopping you from never getting out again. Of course, there's the usual stick of figuring out what is really going on amidst a whole load of grotty events as you play an investigative journalist out for the truth. With limited battery power horror and impending darkness going a long way to making Outlast's atmosphere almost unbearable. Add to that a hide button and no weapons, and you've got an experience designed to make you suffer. Combining all the best parts of horror tropes into one sickly mess, it is a gift only for those that can afford the endless sets of new trousers needed to make it through the end of a playthrough. 2. Resident Evil 7 VR, 2017. VR is an uncanny enough experience as it is. Taking the world we know and transforming it into one of pixels where imagination becomes reality seems like an exciting premise. But when you take that idea and use the wrong imagination, one pumped full of blood, guts, and icky viruses, the whole thing soon becomes a little less magic than anticipated. Resident Evil 7 is one game that absolutely pushed its rank zombies and gory gameplay to the limit before any technological wizardry, but then burst through the constraints and into the future by wrapping the whole thing up in virtual reality. If strapping a world of pain onto your face and stepping inside it sounds appealing, then you are gonna love this whole deal. Resident Evil 7 brought a whole new wave of innovation to its classic franchise stylings, and in the process made one of the most singularly disturbing experiences brought to gaming systems by making it wholly interactive. Virtual reality was made for Beat Saber, and Beat Saber only, not this. Yet here we are anyway, and oh boy, is it literally the best and worst thing that has ever been brought to screen. 1. Alien Isolation, 2014. The #1 spot on the scariest video games of the decade has to deliver some serious frights, and one featuring a hulking xenomorph hunting you down across a desolate space station is absolutely gonna have it in the bag. Alien Isolation is the culmination of all the most terrifying parts of the Alien franchise, pitting Amanda Ripley against an unstoppable foe as she attempts to find out what fate befell the original Nostromo. What makes Isolation such a banger of a game is its clever manipulation of two AI systems. One knows where you are and gives clues to the other, which then decides what actions the alien will take to get there and what it will do to find you. This constant state of peril that is ingrained into the game's very coding unleashes waves of unease at every turn, and makes every playthrough as unpredictable as the first, since the xenomorph acts almost completely of its own accord. Combining an engrossing story, terrifying methodology, and an actual solid entry into the Alien gaming universe, Isolation is one of the very best of its kind at scaring us silly, and deserves all the more celebration for it. And that's our list. What other terrifying games would you add to this list? And more importantly, do you agree with it? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. I've been Ash, and this has been WhatCulture Gaming. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back again soon for more decade-spanning content. Thanks for watching.